うな演説に信じれませんでしたが、どうぞ。
はい。皆さん、映画はいかがか。
So, how did you like the movie? Did you like it?
Yes.
I'm the producer of the film. I'm joining from Tokyo remotely. I had an opportunity to speak at a Global Greens event last year, but I'm glad I have another opportunity like this to speak to you. One thing I really wanted to say in the movie was, once the nuclear incident occurs, no human being can stop it. And it was to the scale that it could have destroyed Japan. And the Prime Minister at the time asked the Kondo or the staffers to come up with the worst case scenario and what would Japan do in that scenario, including how many other people have to be evacuated and what range. And the worst case scenario included 250-kilometer zone of evacuation that includes Tokyo. That's impacts 300,000 people or more than that. But that was the worst case scenario, and fortunately we were able to avoid that. That was due to a series of miracles. First of all, the Fukushima Daiichi has 6 reactors. The 1 and 2, they melted down, and 1, 3, and 4 experienced hydrogen explosion. Fortunately, the pressure vessels and containment vessels were not destroyed. And however, the one containment vessel came very close to that. And if the containment vessel, once one wrong step could have terribly gone and explode, led the entire facility to an explosion. And however, there was some other weaknesses to the reactor 2 and the unit reactor 4 of the facility, which allowed the pressure to escape from the facility, and that was a miracle. If we did experience an explosion, then it would have led to a catastrophic event with debris everywhere and radiation everywhere. In reactor 4, the spent the fuel, there were 1,530 units in total, and immersed in water. If those the fuel rods were not in either water and became exposed, you would have had again a catastrophic impact due to the exposure. And a simulation by the U.S. organization simulated that in that event, people in Tokyo would be affected, and that is why the U.S. government ordered every one of the citizens evacuated from Japan. Fortunately, again though, but somehow water found its way into reactor 4, and those fuel rods never became exposed. And again, a hydrogen explosion happened in the facility 4, the reactor 4 facility, creating a hole which allowed people to inject water inside the facility. But again, huge a massive explosion or reactor 4 would have destroyed Japan altogether, and if a hydrogen explosion was too small, we wouldn't have been able to inject water inside the facility. So it was a miracle that the hydrogen explosion happened at just the right scale. Losing Tokyo again in the worst case scenario would have meant losing the Japan's capital. So what I'm trying to say is, due to a series of the miracles, the fortunate accidents, we were able to avoid the worst case scenario. So considering this case, we need to stop the operation of the nuclear power plant altogether and not allow the government to build additional other plants, no matter what the situation is. We need to put a stop to this altogether and shift to a more safe, the natural, and the recyclable sources. So let me talk about the situation in Japan now. Last July, Prime Minister Shinzo Abe was assassinated. He was shot to death. And the perpetrator of the crime had this hatred towards a religious organization called the Unification Church, and the Prime Minister Abe and had a relationship with the Unification Church, and that was one of the motivations. And the Unification Church has a headquarters in Seoul, Korea, where the Global Greens Conference is being held, and Moon Sung-non is the head guru of that organization. And the Unification Church's philosophy is that it's very overrated to begin with, and he believes that Japan is Korea's underling, and Korea has a right to take everything from Japan because Japan invaded Korea in the past. And a lot of the Japanese, under the mind control of the organization, are selling their real estate properties and houses to donate to the organization. They're being forced to buy meaningless jars and holy books, and which led to many families getting destroyed, and some people were even forced to take their own lives. The right wing, including the former Prime Minister Abe, don't like the Korea and China, so in a way they discriminated them. So, they were not supposed to see things eye to eye. And however, a Japanese politician, particularly the Liberal Democratic Party, he had a relationship with them for over 30 years because they brought in votes and helped out with the election by providing staffs. In 2011, the Fukushima Daiichi incident happened, and after that, the Prime Minister, now Kokan of the Democratic Party, put a stop to Hamaoka, a nuclear power plant, and other plants after that. And one time, all nuclear plants were shut down. So that continued for 2 years. But towards the end of 2012, when Shinzo Abe became Prime Minister again, he opened a path to the nuclear energy once again. But 10 years after that, Prime Minister Abe was assassinated. You would think that would put a stop to this the nuclear energy, but that wasn't so. The current Prime Minister Fumio Kishida announced a major policy change last year. One is to double the military power of Japan, and also to bring back the nuclear energy. After World War II, Japan promised the world never to become a military power again, and that's in the constitution, and maintain its defense budget under 1% of its GDP, but without any explanation to the Diet or to the people. The cabinet unilaterally decided to double it to 2% of GDP. And also Prime Minister Kishida announced this basic policy to utilize nuclear energy as maximum towards the end of 2022. This is a huge nuclear policy change since 2011. And this change allows new nuclear power plants to be built replacements, and also abandoning the 40-year rule. And you may not know what 40-year rule is about, but this new rule, 40-year rules only enable 40 years of operation in principle and allow one extension for up to 20 years. That was a 40-year rule. But the new rule excludes the period spent in review by a regulatory committee from the calculation of this 40 years or 60 years. So that means if there's a plant that was shut down for the past 10 years, theoretically that nuclear power plant can be operated for up to 70 years. When it comes to devices in a nuclear power plant, you can replace equipment like piping and central control panel and things like that, but you cannot replace core items like pressure vessels and containment vessels. Those equipment are constantly exposed to the high level radiation, the durability is low, and it's very dangerous. And what's worse, you cannot inspect them. In Europe, a reactor is ready for decommission after 30-some years, and 70 years, double that. Japan is very prone to earthquake, probably the world worst. And we know how terrible nuclear energy is from the Fukushima Daiichi incident. But yet, despite all that, we are making this a big nuclear policy change. I'm sure the world is laughing at us, and I am utterly embarrassed by it. There are other specific issues around Japan's nuclear energy and energy in general. In terms of radioactive waste, this is not something issue Japan can solve on its own or the world. But as of 2020, 14 nuclear plants in Japan have already reached 80% capacity for the storing of spent fuel, and 4 plants with over 90%. We have issues up to our neck. We are barely staying afloat, yet Japan is preparing to bring back nuclear energy. Fukushima Daiichi's contaminated water situation is reaching its limit as well. As you know, in the Fukushima Daiichi's incident, the fuel rod within the nuclear reactor melted down, penetrated the pressure vessels, and they are still there as debris. 12 years after the incident, the debris still has to be pulled, or else the reactor will go out of control. The cooling water is exposed to the highest level of radiation, then goes through ALPS, the treatment device, and is stored, and is still being stored to this day as contaminated water containing the radioactive material tritium. On the premises of Fukushima Daiichi, it's full of tanks with treated water. So the government decided to release the treated water to sea. People in the local community, including the fishermen, many of them are against it, but TEPCO is not listening to it. Actually, TEPCO actually created a pool containing water with the same level of concentration and put some fish in it to demonstrate its safety. The best shot economy, perhaps. Last week, inspection team, IAEA inspection team, 17 members came to Fukushima. These 17 members included IAEA employees and also external researchers from 9 countries, including Korea and China. This was requested by Japan to alleviate concerns both inside, domestically and internationally, and also to get IAEA's approval that discharge of this treated water is okay. It is the intent of the Japanese government to proceed with the discharge based on the inspection team's report. Neighboring countries, people around the world, I'm not affiliated with the Japanese government or the TEPCO, but I want to apologize to you all. So there's not a single good piece of news when it comes to nuclear energy in Japan. I would like to tell you some positive news, like, okay, nuclear energy is finished in Japan, like Germany, but that's not, unfortunately, that's not so. So how can we go ahead without nuclear energy? Well, the answer is very simple. We need more natural energy. It will solve all the problems. You probably know things about recyclable energy more than me, but let me talk a little bit about it. The headline article on Nikkei last week, on June 2nd to be exact, said this: IEA's forecast is that by 2024, close to 50% of the world's power in the amount of 4.5 billion kilowatt will come from recyclable energy. Japan's lagging behind, the world is definitely making a shift toward recyclable energy. Obviously, this recyclable energy doesn't emit CO2, it's free, so you no longer need to import crude oil or gas, you don't have to build expensive nuclear power plant. If you have, we already have the technology to cover the demand with just recyclable energy, but nuclear proponents and the power companies have for many years used the media to mislead the people, telling them things like, oh, recycled energy is meaningless, it's nothing when it rains or when the wind blows or something like that. But unfortunately, many people believe it. And what's worse, Russia invaded Ukraine, and the fuel cost increased, and the power companies applied the government to increase their prices. And last week, the government approved it. TEPCO is increasing the price by 15.3%. The burden the consumers have to bear. So this burden is pretty bad enough, but it's also a message that unless we bring back nuclear energy, the power bill, the electricity bill is going to be higher. When it comes to power saving, Japan has never set a target value and instructed the people to save power. If we set that target value, so naturally, in Japan being Japanese, they would make their best effort to save energy, but it's more convenient for the proponents, government, for them to be able to say that we don't have enough power, because that drives the shift toward nuclear energy. That's why we've never had a serious debate regarding power saving. And there was the recent survey, the result that was posted in the headline article of Asahi. And a majority of people are in support of Japan increasing its the military budget and also bringing back nuclear energy. The world is gradually changing. Russia's invasions of Ukraine is very unfortunate. And when that news struck Far East to Japan, it created this hugely twisted added value. After the World War II, the Japanese respected and lived by its constitution and pursued peace. But now, with this Russian invasion of Ukraine happening, a lot of Japanese are starting to believe that we need to increase our defense budget to protect ourselves. And also, a lot of people are starting to believe that because the fuel price is increasing, and we may need to accept nuclear energy. I want my movie to be seen by as many people as possible, to educate them, to let them know that nuclear energy cannot be accepted. It's on YouTube right now for free, and for a limited time, it's being offered in Korean as well. French, Polish, and also Italian are being produced, and it's completed. I would like to create an animated version as well. But in Japan, the animators are so busy with other other works that they don't have the resources to accommodate my request. So if anyone, any animators are listening to this outside of Japan, please help me out. So now that COVID is ending, I would like to start going overseas and do more screenings. I would pay my own way, my plane ticket, my hotel to do the screening outside Japan. And lastly, I would like to apologize as a Japanese for allowing the Fukushima Daiichi incident to happen in the first place and causing huge damage. So let's continue to work together to make a positive future and bright future.
Thank you so much. それでは少しプロデューサーの立花の方に質問がある方、手を挙げてもらえればと思います。
If you have a question, please raise your hand.
Thank you very much for the film. Many Australians are concerned about the release of the radioactive water. Is there much opposition in Japan, and what can we do to try and stop the Japanese government or TEPCO from releasing this water?
ああ、そうか。日本語に通訳しないとわからない。
はい。質問者が喋ってるときはみんな黙っていてもらえると僕聞こえないんでごめんなさい。Sorry, there were the number of people speaking. I didn't get your the second half of your question. You were saying, are there many opposition in Japan? What was that afterwards?
Yeah, my question is about the release of the radioactive water, which I understand is due to happen this summer. What can the world do to stop TEPCO or the Japanese government from releasing this 2 million litres of highly radioactive water into the Pacific Ocean? And is there much opposition from the Japanese people?
素晴らしい映画ありがとうございました。私、オーストラリアでもこの汚染水の海洋放水については懸念を示している人が多いのですが、私からの質問は、東京電力、そして日本政府がこの200万リットルですか、余りのこの汚染水を海に出してしまうこと、これを世界は日本以外の国としてはこれを止めるために何ができるのでしょうか。それがまず1つ目の質問。そして2つ目が、日本においてはこのやめてくださいと反対する動きというのは結構大きいものなんですか。どういった動きがあるんですか。
はい、私の方の答えでいいですか。
Well, can I provide an answer? Well,
まず世界の人が何か
first of all, your first question about what can people in the world do?
言ってくれるというのはね、それは非常にありがたいって言ったら変です。
It's very It's strange to say, but it's encouraging for you to
今まで
say
日本
that.
人の取り方とか日本人の考え方って割とその外圧というのに弱いんだよ。だから
Japanese people are very weak towards the external pressure. So when people are telling us this and that,
皆さんで
we are
ね、
more likely to change.
何かこう日本にこんなことはしちゃダメだという、
So,
例えば
yeah.
グリーン緑のと
For example, the Green parties outside
とか
Japan,
緑と世界連合とか、まあ、グローバ
or
ル
the World Alliance,
どんど
or
ん
any organization outside
いろん
Japan,
なファックスなり
and
声なりを
send the
れば
email to
違う
send
と
a
思いますね
facsimile or whatever, and reach out to the Japanese government and official to put pressure on them. That would be very helpful.
それから日本国内での運動っていうのはもちろん
And
その
your second question,
反対
the opposition in Japan,
人たちはいますけど、
there's a group of opponents in
日本
Japan.
はその市民運動とかそういうものがものすごく今弱くなっている。
But in Japan, we're in a phase where this civil action is really weak. It's really weak in Japan.
2015
Have a hard time getting
年
momentum.
の安保法制といってその集団自衛権を認めるようにその法律を
2015,
改正するという動きの時には
there was a timing
海外
to renew this defense security treaty with the US. There was a protest.
だけどもそれ以来ほとんどそういう政治的動きが小さくなってしまって今日本では本当に
to oppose that. However, that didn't really gain
いわゆる
momentum.
市民派からすると市民運動が小さくなってしまう時期なので大変
A lot of us civil activists are having a really tough time, but it's just very hard to gain momentum.
マイクさんすいません会場が一応両方の音に流してますので、筑後でお願いできますでしょうか。で立花さんすいません一つ一つ切って止めていただければありがたいです。お願いします。
はいはいわかりました同時でやるのかと思って私喋ってたんですよく聞こえたら聞こえないですよね
すいませんごめんなさい。
はいじゃあ中学にします
はい、どうぞ。
もう一回簡単に言いますと、
はい
外から日本人っていうのは外圧に弱いから外からいろんな人命が飛んであろうとどこであろうとどんどんいろんな人がその言ってくれるのは非常に嬉しいです。もう一つ言うと2015年のその安保法制の改正の時なんか市民が国会を十数万人が取り巻くというような市民運動が起きたりもしたんですけれど今はもう本当にそういうものがなくなって一番市民運動が弱い時期に来てしまっているんです。とても残念です。
So yeah, sorry about that. I'll translate it consecutively from here. Well, to your first question about what can the world do? Well, Japan tends to be very weak when it's faced with that external pressure. So I would encourage all of you outside of Japan to put more pressure on the government and try to exact change. And I'm very glad that you, someone like you are voicing your opinion. So let's make that happen. And your second question about opposition in Japan, well, back in 2005, when the timing was to renew the national security treaty with the U.S., there was a huge movement, and a lot of people came together to surround the Diet building to demonstrate their will, so to speak. But that didn't really amount to much, and since then, nothing big has come of it. So it's very hard to gain momentum in that matter. どうぞ。
私の答えはそこまでです。
Any other questions?
最後言うからもうちょっとだけ。
はい、ありがとうございました。Who's next?
こんにちは、立花さん、ルナです。18区の。お久しぶりです。え？
聞こえてないだと思う。
ルナさん。
はい、18区の菅さんの選挙でお世話になった。私の質問は何度も映画の中で情報が回らない情報がなかなかなぜか他の人には情報が届いているけど首相には情報が届いてないっていうことが何度も言われてたと思うんですけどなんであんなに情報が伝わらなかったんでしょうか。
So my question is, in the movie, we saw in a number of occasions that where information wasn't getting distributed appropriately, not being shared. There were times that some people had this piece of information, but the prime minister didn't have it, and vice versa. So why is that? Why did that happen in the first place?
最大の理由はその東京電力という会社、東京電力だけじゃないんですけれど、日本の大企業というのはそもそもあまり情報を出さない、情報を出さないということが、美徳じゃないけど、そういう古い体質でもあり、自分たちを防御する方法だというふうに考えている、それが最大の理由です。そしてまた今回のように困った時には、なんていうか、自分たちだけで解決してしまえというふうに、考え込んじゃうんだと思います。だから情報はなるべく出さない。それからもう一つは、これはどうなのか、出したとしてもうまく伝わらない、どこかで切れてしまうというのはあったと思います。だから総理のところまでいかない。で、一番後で、
立花さん、一旦切りましょうか。はい。そう、マイクさんどうぞお願いします。
はい、わかりました。So to answer your question, I think the biggest reason is that this is not limited to TEPCO, but big Japanese companies like that, including TEPCO, don't tend to share or disclose information in the first place. These big companies in Japan tend to believe that is the virtue and a way to protect themselves by keeping information inside. And they tend, whenever they're faced with a difficulty, they tend to try to solve the problem on their own. And even if they did disclose the information, those information didn't necessarily get to the prime minister. It's somewhere along the road they got cut off.
別の一つの分かりやすい例として、そのスピーディーというその放射能がどっちに流れているかということをね、ちゃんとその情報をつかめるような装置があったんですよね。で、そのスピーディーを完全に何かその放射能がこっち流れてるんだからそっちへ逃げてはいけませんよみたいな、そういう情報さえあったのに、官邸のすぐ近くまで来てても官邸はそれをキャッチできずに、結局後で考えたら放射能が北東に流れてるのに人が北東に逃げてしまったという、こういう不幸を起こしています。それはもういくら後で悔やんでもしょうがないんだけど、情報の不確かさというのは、さっき言った東電のような会社の体質でもあるし、ある意味ではなんかこれは何ですかね、偉い人って情報を隠すのかなこれはフランスで話したら日本だけじゃないよって言われましたけど、皆さんの国ではいかがですか。私の答えはそこまでです。
And one good example is to do with a speedy system. This system that tells us the direction of the radiation, radioactive flow. And they could have helped us tremendously at the time to plan the route of evacuation. The Cabinet Office of Japan could use this tool effectively to plan their evacuation, but they couldn't. They couldn't catch on. And as a result, when the radiation was going to northeast, the government instructed people to evacuate northeast. So that was very unfortunate. So there was that uncertainty around information in a sense, and like I said before, big company like TEPCO believe it's a virtue to keep the information to themselves, and I believe that is the same tendency when it comes to people with higher ranking officials, and I don't know how it is in other countries like France or elsewhere. I would like to know what you think.
すみません、一つ今間違いがありました。スピーディーは、ノースイーストではなくてノースウエストですね。に実際には放射能が流れていきました。
So I meant to say northwest instead of northeast.
Thank you for coming, everybody. It is very late, so we want to conclude today's gathering. Well, before the end, well, I think you learned a lot from this movie. What did you learn? Do you think it is just because Japanese government and Japanese company like TEPCO, they were wrong, they were responsible? How about your country? How about your government? And how about your private company, big company? Are they responsible enough? Do they disclose their information enough? Well, I don't think. Well, government, administrations, and big companies, capitalists, they are selfish. So we have to learn this. We want you to learn from this a lot. And it is just because Japan has a lot of earthquake, Japan was unlucky? Or, well, I don't think so. There are many reasons to happen this disaster. There are many reasons to make this disaster happen. What about the war actually happening in Ukraine? What about Zaporizhia? Nuclear power plant is very easy target for them and very fatal target. Well, on Saturday we are having a session, so we will know much about what happened. Actually, what happened after the disaster, the nuclear or radioactive air blew to the east and go west and go north and go west south. Well, fortunately for Japanese, most of radioactive materials were gone to the Pacific Ocean. But unfortunate for the Pacific Islanders. And now, just very soon, Japanese government will allow the discharge of contaminated water to the Pacific Ocean again. So the ocean will be contaminated. So please come to our session on Saturday at 2 o'clock at room 206, and please vote for our resolution to oppose the Japan's discharge of the contaminated water. Before that, tomorrow we are having the World Cafe. We can discuss directly with you what's happening, what you think, or what you're thinking. Thank you very much for tonight. Thank you. 立花さん、ありがとうございました。So, you guys say thank you, Mr. Tachibana, and his kindness and his generosity. People can see the movie for free by YouTube until the end of this month. Thank you. ありがとうございました。Thank you very much, 立花さん。
Will there be a film against fossil fuels? Or each of it be focused on nuclear?
はい、皆さんありがとうございました。それではセッションを取ります。立花さんありがとうございました。
はい、ありがとうございました。またどっかでお会いしましょう。
お会いしましょう。